Hello, this is PJ from pjburnett.com, and today we're going to talk about something very important. That's domain registrations. Why should you register a domain name? That's a whole separate video. I'll do that next time. But how do you register a domain name the correct way, and not the way some inexperienced YouTuber told you how to do it? I found out that YouTube is promoting people that don't know what they're talking about, and so that's why I'm making this video. A lot of YouTubers are promoting Bluehost, and the reason why they're doing that is because Bluehost is paying them a commission. Or maybe they just don't want to explain to people the proper way to do something because they're trying to save time, or they're just lazy. But most likely it's because Bluehost is paying them a commission, and that's also why WordPress.org is promoting Bluehost. It's because they're probably getting paid by Bluehost, and Bluehost might have been a good company at some point, but it was acquired by a larger multinational company, and from what I've heard, the quality has gone way down. But in general, Bluehost has never had a reputation for being a good hosting company. But the point is not to debate hosting companies. I mean, everyone likes to debate hosting companies. If you want to start a flame war, that's a perfectly acceptable way to do it. But this is not a video about hosting companies. And even though when you sign up for your hosting company, a lot of times they'll ask you if you want to register a domain name. And why are they able to do that? Because they're resellers for a domain registrar. So you absolutely do not want to have your hosting company and your domain registrar as the same company. It's like in the United States, we have separation of powers. We have the president and we have the legislative branch. And so we have different branches of government to separate the powers of the government. That keeps people more or less honest. So that's also why you want to have your domain registration hosted, or it's not really hosted, but you want to have your domain registration registered with a separate company from your hosting company. Now, why is this? First of all, it's just a specialization thing. You want your registrar to be specializing in domain registrations. For instance, somebody could send in fake letterhead, fake documents, and steal your business. And so you want to have a good company doing your domain registration. I recommend you research this. Ask around, ask people that are more experienced what registrar they recommend, how much spam do they send, do they trust their registrar, are they a reseller, or do they actually do the registrations themselves, or is this a reseller? What kind of reputation do they have? You can go on Web Hosting Talk. I don't know if that site's still around, but it should be, and that's originally where I researched my registrar, which is Namecheap. And I read hundreds of reviews before choosing Namecheap. Before that I had different registrars. So maybe every few years or every 10 years or whatever, you want to look up who are the best registrars still. So you want to trust your registrar because they're holding your business. It's like your domain registration is like your phone number or your address. So you want to trust your registrar. Let's just put it that way, okay? And find a company that specializes in domain registrations. And if you need a professional like me to handle this for you, that's perfectly fine, because it's not very easy to understand. But I'm explaining it to you right now, just if you wanted to do it yourself. So the first thing you want to do is sign up for your registrar, get your domain name. It should only cost you about between $10 and $15. If it costs more than that, you're getting screwed. If it's less than $10, There's probably some kind of catch. So they're going to be trying to upsell you to buy different stuff. You don't want to buy anything else besides the domain name. Sometimes they do offer, just for the sake of keeping this simple, you don't want to upgrade to anything else. They're going to try to sell you web hosting, of course, but I would say resist that urge and find another hosting company that's separate. And I've seen situations where people get into some kind of a dispute with their hosting company, or they're just the hosting company is just not answering the phone, or they're just not, maybe there's some kind of a problem. There's always some kind of a problem. There's just if you've been around a while, things happen. There's billing problems, people don't pay their bills, somewhere along the chain, like maybe you pay your bills and your hosting company pays their bills, but maybe somebody up the food chain didn't pay their bill, and so the site's down, or maybe there's like a denial of service attack, power outage, flood, hurricane. There's any number of things. I could go on and on. So there's failures that happen. And if your hosting company has a massive failure, like a disk fails, they're not concerned about you. They have thousands, maybe even millions of other customers. They're not they're not going to answer the phone to deal with your problem. And it's also very likely that their administration panels will also be offline, so there's no way for you to switch to another hosting company if your domain registration is at the same company as your hosting company. That's why you should keep them separate. And a lot of people have not experienced this yet, but they will eventually. It's just a matter of time, and all you have to do is just do some research. The safest hosting in the world, which was on the cover of Wired magazine, you can do some research. This was advertised as the safest hosting in the world. It was on a remote island in the middle of the ocean, guarded by armed guards with machine guns. The actual servers were hosted in a room with unbreathable gas, where no people could go without like a special oxygen tank. And it was like a separate country, even with its own government that was completely separate. So it had no, there would be no like legal problems with other countries. On and on. This is like a remote island that you couldn't get to, only by helicopter. And you're thinking, wow, that sounds really safe. It sounds really good. But then guess what happened? It caught on fire, and there was a big explosion because of that unbreathable gas. Somehow it exploded, and the whole thing caught on fire and burned down. Now you got to wonder, was there some kind of a conspiracy there? Probably there was some kind of, but who knows what really happened? No, I don't know. But in any case, the safest hosting in the world is going to have problems. There was another story where a guy broke into a hosting company with a chainsaw, and there was an armed guard there, and I'm not sure if he was shot or what happened, but things happen. Professional larger companies like let's say Google, they have complete systems designed to fail over. So if one data center goes down, they can fail over to another data center. I was talking to somebody that works in San Antonio, and they said they had their school has 2 underground data centers. So if one data center goes down, they can fail over to a completely separate underground facility. So there's all kinds of bunkers and things like this that are designed to keep your websites running. But things fail, and so you can spend as much money as you want on this problem, but that just depends on how important it is that your your website remains online. Now I'm talking more to the small business. I'm not going to talk too much about having a completely redundant setup, but the most important thing is keep your hosting company separate from your domain registrar. The next most important thing is your domain registrar will offer you something called DNS. And so your hosting company gives you the equivalent of a phone number. It's just a number, like it's called an IP address, like 1.2.3.4 or something like that. But when you tell someone, hey, my website's whatever.com, you don't want to have to tell them what the number is. Like, hey, write this number down. It's 4.7.9.10. You know, like that's not as easy to tell people what your address is. And besides, that address may change over time. Like, let's say you switch hosting companies, now you have a different number. Or even at the same hosting company, sometimes you change numbers. So that number is a temporary kind of throwaway thing. And the domain name, the reason why you have a domain registration is because you want to be able to keep that for the rest of your life, no matter how many times your number changes, your IP number changes. So that's why when you go into your registrar, you don't necessarily want to use your registrar's DNS service. Most registrars will have a free DNS service. A lot of hosting companies will have a free DNS service. If you're serious about your business, you don't necessarily want to use that free service, because like I said, separation of powers, you want to keep things separate, because if there's a failure, you want to be able to change the other two. Like if your DNS goes down, you could go into your registrar and change DNS providers. And so it's good to keep things separate. It's like a long time ago, stereo systems used to have different components that were separate. So like if your speakers broke, you could just buy new speakers. You wouldn't have to buy a whole new sound system. Same concept. So which DNS provider do I recommend? You can do research yourself. I think ComScore tracks the fastest DNS providers. One of the fastest ones is called DNS Made Easy. I recommend them. I've used them before, and they're usually in the top 3 fastest DNS providers. It's relatively easy to use, and the price is pretty good. It's pretty affordable. And so you can use that in conjunction with your domain registration. And the benefit of this is, let's say your hosting company goes offline, and your website is gone. Like, no one can access it. You're not making any money. You're essentially out of business. You can, if you have a backup copy of your website, you can copy that to another host, and instantly you can change your you can have everyone directed to the new website instantly. It's literally instantly. Why? Because everyone that has your domain name, their computers are pointing to your DNS provider. So, if you were using your web hosting company's DNS provider, and then you switched hosting companies, you have to wait for something called propagation, and propagation can take days. Sometimes it could take a really long time, depending on how fast people are updating their DNS information. Most propagation happens within a few hours, but it can take days. So if the best thing to do is to have a DNS service that's separate, and then if your website goes offline, you just change the hosting company information in your DNS service, and that will instantly swap everybody over, or it'll instantly direct people to the new hosting company. There's no waiting involved. So it's a three-legged system. You have the DNS provider, the hosting provider, and the registrar. Keep those separate, and you'll be much better off in the long run. Now, does this protect your free speech? Probably a lot better than hosting all of your data on, some free service, because you have a lot more control. But I think I'll make a separate video about that. And so if you have any questions, let me know. But I think that about summarizes it. Thanks for listening. Let me know if that was helpful.